Europe's in a crisis. We cannot ignore what's happened with Brexit.
I mean, Britain leaving the common market is equivalent to 19 smaller and medium-sized countries leaving the common market at the same time.
We need to show that the EU is willing to make some concessions rather than shooting itself in the foot just to punish the British.
I now ask the question, where is this white paper on the future of Europe? Where is it, Mr. Juncker? Where are you? Could you not have stayed here for 3 hours? Do you not get paid enough to do your damn job?
For a decade here, I have noticed that centralising, authoritarian tone began to sound very like the old Soviet Union.
Jeremy Hunt, who is comparing the European Union with the Soviet Union. He has once even confused Japan with China, you know.
Nobody voted for these guys, and nobody can get rid of these guys. They can do what the hell they like.
Mr. Barnier is indeed very active, but he seems to be very eloquent on the economic impact, on describing the economic impact on Britain. He never says anything about the economic impact on Europe. I mean, Britain leaving the common market is equivalent to 19 smaller and medium-sized countries leaving the common market at the same time. And to come up with a new trade deal with one country is one thing, but to disentangle the relationships of thousands of companies, which has grown over 40 years, is quite another. Mr. Juncker, had you at that time offered Britain a special deal on freedom of movement, Brexit would not have happened. Yes, it is absolutely true. And by the way, those who moan here, I would like to remind you that Mr. Schröder got a special deal in 2004 when Poland came against my opposition at that time. For 7 years, a restriction on freedom of movement of Poles coming into Germany, which, by the way, the British Prime Minister did not want. Now, in order to end the confusion in London, we must end the ignorance here in Brussels. Mr. Juncker, as a German, I always felt that it was right that Britain won the battle of Britain. Make sure you are not going to lose the battle for Britain.
But the EU shouldn't be smiling too early, because an agreement for the EU is more important than it is for the British. Our exports to the UK are greater than our imports from the UK. We've signed a free trade agreement with Canada, and this should be possible with the United Kingdom. There should not be a second referendum in the UK. We need to show that the EU is willing to make some concessions rather than shooting itself in the foot just to punish the British.
And in this Brexit debate, I can only say to you, I think you are moving in the wrong direction. The British have decided to leave the European Union. I regret it, because I would have liked to have kept them as a reforming partner. But a democratic vote should be respected. And I don't think some form of revenge campaign should be turned against them. I think we should turn to the British in friendship. Finally, with the British, we should be able to negotiate an orderly exit procedure, not try and attack them in a spirit of revenge.
On behalf of the Europe of Freedom and Direct Democracy Group, Mr. Farage.
Thank you. Well, as the moment of truth approaches for the Brexit negotiations in a couple of weeks' time, I have to say Brexiteers are dismayed at the way that our Prime Minister has acted. I've got to hand it, Mr. Juncker, to your negotiators. They're very much better than ours. The previously undiscussed issue of the Irish border, never a problem at any point during the referendum, has very effectively been weaponised by Barnier. But of course, this has got nothing to do with the Good Friday Agreement, nothing to do with the peace process whatsoever. No, Barnier is much cleverer than that. This is all to do with making sure that the United Kingdom stays with the European regulatory framework. The one thing Barnier has been scared of from the start is us leaving and us becoming competitive. Sadly, the British Prime Minister has fallen hook, line and sinker for this, and we find ourselves now going into this next summit in a very weak position. There is, of course, a better approach to all of this that would satisfy both democratically the Brexit vote and, I think, the demands of German industry and exporters. I mean, don't forget what an important marketplace we are. Your exporters call us Treasure Island. So many motor cars and so much wine and Belgian chocolate do you sell us. We should go for a simple free trade deal. For 20 years here, everybody from Commissioner Kinnock to Giscard d'Estaing has said to me, if you want to leave political union, and have a free trade deal, that's fine by us. We just need a Prime Minister who actually understands it. Now, I know the European Commission would not necessarily want this because I think they're trying to use the Brexit process as a means of saying leaving this club comes at a price. But I do believe it would be possible. But we get to the heart, of course, of what this European Union is when we see the behaviour of the unelected bureaucrats, people like Mr Tusk, whose behaviour at Salzburg was arrogant, low-grade, pretty vulgar in every respect. But that is what you get when you design a form of government that gives power without accountability. Nobody voted for these guys, and nobody can get rid of these guys. They can do what the hell they like, and increasingly, the authoritarian nature of this club, taking away voting rights from Hungary, Poland, and who knows next. There is one little victory, though, that I'm pleased with. For a decade here, I have noticed that centralising, authoritarian tone began to sound very like the old Soviet Union, the concept of limited sovereignty of individual nation states. I even talked in the past about the Volkerkerker, the old Austro-Hungarian prison of nations, and to see the British Foreign Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, now using that language means we have shifted the centre of gravity, we have shifted this debate. I know many of you here still think that we're a hostage and that you're going to demand some extraordinary ransom from us. We're not. We're a free people. Under the right leadership, we'd say to you, let's have a free trade deal, or we would simply walk away.
Qualche differenza con l'Unione Sovietica c'è.
There are differences with the Soviet Union, which caused millions of deaths. I don't think that the European Union has done that.
As we approach October Council, let me once again make some things clear to both Mr Barnier and the Member States who continue to use Northern Ireland and the impossible demands of the backstop as a sword hanging over the outcome of the negotiations. The idea, as proposed in the backstop, that we would allow Northern Ireland to become some sort of semi-detached part of the United Kingdom is both offensive and outrageous. Protecting the constitutional and economic integrity of the United Kingdom is a red line that cannot be broken or bent.
And this unity is absolutely needed. And when you see these insane notions of some Tory politicians the last days, Boris Johnson, his latest invention, you have seen that is to build a bridge. He will solve the problem by building a bridge between the UK mainland and Ireland, while Mr Boris Johnson is more known for burning bridges than for building bridges. And then there is Mr Rees-Mogg, who is saying, yeah, I have the proposal for the future of Brexit. The ordinary citizens can be secure, their savings will be secure after Brexit. And in the meanwhile, he's opening himself an investment fund in Ireland to transfer his money to Ireland. And then, Manfred Weber already talked about it, Jeremy Hunt, who is comparing the European Union with the Soviet Union. But in his case, I have to tell you that is not so abnormal, Manfred. He has once even confused Japan with China, you know. So that is not the first time that this is happening. But that said, the previous time he was insulting his wife, but here he does something far more different. He's insulting not us, but millions of ordinary citizens who have lived under Soviet rule for so long time. And that is in fact a point on which he has to apologize, I think, because we cannot take it as such a thing he said.
Finally, on Brexit, and I can see that the biggest ego in this House, after he did his speech, has left again, as he always does, Mr Farage, who is literally playing Russian roulette with his Russian friends, with the well-being of the British people, and now by criticising Mrs May, trying to dodge responsibility for the mess that he has created and that the British people are going to pay the price for.
This House and the Commission which was confirmed by this House and with its president directly elected, is fully democratically legitimate, and we must assert that it has more legitimacy than the Prime Minister, who was never confirmed by a vote in her House, but was installed in office by kissing the Queen's ring. And despite many efforts, the House of Lords has never been elected in the UK.
Mr Brok, MEP Brok, like it or not, the UK and the Republic of Ireland are going to have to get on, and it's going to have to work out. However that happens, it's going to be difficult, but it's going to have to work out. And for that to work out, we don't need MEPs like you coming in here. I'm no fan of Mrs May, no fan of the Conservative Party, but it doesn't help you coming in here questioning whether their Prime Minister is legitimate or not. It's up to them to decide. I'll say it again, no time for her, but you are not helping. You're making it worse, Elmar.
And give us your 30-second question. Mr Flanagan, thank you.
Well, I think that we've now got to a stage in the Brexit negotiations where time is getting tighter and tighter. And I get the impression that efforts are being made to try and already pass the blame for a possible failure as far as possible from everyone involved, particularly within the British government. And we seem to be preparing for a possible failure of the negotiations. The people are positioning themselves for a restart after a failure. And this leads to the embarrassing statements by British ministers that are just absolutely unacceptable. And then there's also the talk about what should come afterwards in terms of free trade agreements. I think that we should do nothing at this point that would prejudice future developments. If there was some possibility of a democratic decision but of a different government by the British government, or a different decision on the European side, these are things that we should not prejudice in advance through negotiations on a free trade agreement. We do not want to tie our hands now, because in that case you would lose the support of my group.
In the UK, but recently also in Macedonia, the referendums put the countries in a dead-end street. It is very clear that Brexit cannot be a success story, nor for the United Kingdom and neither for the European Union. We would warmly welcome the UK back in if they decide to ask their citizens again, and this is the will of the people. Brexit is the most irrational step in the recent history, which, if not changed, will have negative impact for the following decades.
Chaos and confusion reigns when it comes to Brexit. The British government is torn apart by its internal divisions on the matter and is reverting to the tired old game of blaming Brussels for its own internal divisions. It is staggering, gradually zigzagging towards a very damaging Brexit, a costly Brexit, a job-destroying Brexit, a rights-threatening Brexit, a Brexit that bears no resemblance whatsoever to what was promised by the Leave campaign at the time of the referendum. In those circumstances, it's not surprising that more and more British citizens, especially those who voted Leave, are saying, wait a minute, this is not what we were promised, this is not what we were told, and it's damn well not what I voted for. The Labour Party at its Congress last week decided that it will vote against any such damaging withdrawal agreement Brexit deal. If that doesn't bring down this government and cause a general election, then we will support other options, including the possibility of a new referendum, a referendum on the actual Brexit deal. People have a right to stand up for a proper democratic process. People have a right to say, this is not what we were told, this is not what we were promised. The issue of Brexit in Britain is not settled. There is still a struggle going on to make sure we are not led over a cliff edge. Thank you very much.
One thing on which EU27 did agree, though, was their stance on the Brexit negotiation. I shall readily agree that some statements made after Salzburg were unnecessarily blunt, but they came nowhere close to what we heard from the British Foreign Secretary, who took over the now commonplace rhetoric of the far right, comparing the European Union with the Soviet Union. To both leavers and remainers, I will say that it is in no one's best interest to have the United Kingdom crash out of the European Union. This would imperil peace in Ireland. It will jeopardize the prosperity of too many of our fellow citizens, and it would poison the relationship between the two sides for the foreseeable future. We should now focus on the only thing that matters, finding in the next few weeks an agreement on the terms of the withdrawal. This will then provide both sides with the time needed to build our future relationship. And in our view, no relationship between the UK and the EU surpasses EU membership. Who knows? There may come a day in the near or distant future when a majority of British citizens will assert that the only way for Britain to be global is to be part of the European Union. Our door will remain open to you. You will always be welcome where the United Kingdom really belongs. Thank you.
To hear Jeremy Hunt use the far-right trope of associating the European Union with the Soviet Union, this abuse of history is an insult to those who suffered under Soviet repression. I'd like to offer my apology on behalf of the many British people who respect the brave struggle for freedom fought by our friends in Central Europe and the Baltic states. For many countries, the EU has supported their path away from authoritarianism and towards prosperity. Our current cooperation in peace, democracy and human rights celebrates that achievement. Coming from a country that has always prided itself on diplomatic prowess, for me the speech was part of an unfolding national tragedy. This is where the ignorance of Brexit has led us, insulting our friends, misrepresenting our history, indulging our fantasies of a return to the colonial past. But the Brexiteers are running out of steam. In an equally lacklustre speech yesterday, Dominic Raab claimed that democracy is sacrosanct. So I'm waiting for him to join me in calling for a criminal inquiry into Vote Leave, where he was a board member, and into Russian interference in the Brexit campaign. True democracy cannot be based on deceit and an empty prospectus. It requires that British people make a choice on the deal as negotiated, so that they can decide whether this is the Brexit they voted for. When it comes to Brexit, democracy demands a people's vote.